So the first rule in business is you must add value to society in some way. Old school is just make a profit, who cares if it adds value? New school is predominantly social mission. What is your social mission for your company? You see where this all starts? You should be going out in the world saying, how can I change the world and make it a better place?
Jamie McIntyre, while in his mid-20s, found himself in an unenviable position. He was completely broke, in debt to the tune of $150,000, with no job, no prospects, and sleeping on a friend's couch. He had arrived at this point in his life by working hard, long hours in a business he had built from the ground up. He thought he was doing everything right, everything that he had been taught by his parents and teachers that he needed to do to be successful in life. Yet here he was, broke. The business he had built was in tatters. At this point, Jamie decided there simply must be an easier way. There must be something he had done wrong or something he was missing that the wealthy and successful knew. He began to study any successful people he could get access to try and work out exactly what it is that makes them this way and how he could replicate that success in his own life. Jamie came to realise that there is no big secret, but there are some common strategies and a certain way of thinking that aren't taught in the outdated education system that is currently available at schools and universities. And it's these key strategies that mean the difference between the average person working a 40-hour week to make a modest salary and those elite few who achieve financial abundance and live the lifestyle that most people dream of. Within less than 5 years, Jamie had rebuilt his life using the strategies he had discovered. He had gone from flat broke to a self-made millionaire while still in his 20s, and was even nominated for Young Australian of the Year in 1999 for his achievements. Since then, Jamie has made it his life's work to share the strategies he used to get him out of debt and generate massive wealth. He decided the world needed a modern-day 21st century education system, taught by those with a PhD in results, not just theory, an education for life. So he founded a company to do exactly that. Over the past 12 years, 21st century education has educated over 450,000 people worldwide.
What do millionaires do differently? How do they think differently? How do they produce a different result when they have the same opportunity, live in the same economy? Why do some people outperform?
One of his books, What I Didn't Learn at School But Wish I Had, has become a bestseller. And he has now written many other titles on the various strategies he has used to get where he is today. Founder of over a dozen companies that turn over $40 million annually and employ up to 100 staff, Jamie has also been guest speaker at numerous events and programs, including the Sky News business channel's Your Money, Your Call program and the Financial Education Summit, where he shared the stage with some of the world's leading entrepreneurs, including Sir Richard Branson, Tim Ferriss, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mark Bouris, Eddie Maguire, Danny Green, Ruslan Kogan, and Randy Zuckerberg. Jamie also has significant agricultural interests, owning rural farms in the New England region of New South Wales near Glen Innes. Jamie is also the founder of the 21st Century Australia Party and movement, which is also fielding Senate seats. He is a federal candidate for the seat of New England against Tony Windsor and Barnaby Joyce. His passion is now to teach as many people as possible the various trading, property, business and mindset techniques used by some of the world's wealthiest people. Thousands of people have already benefited from these courses and are now living a better life, with more money, more time and less stress than they were before.
Raise your hand, make some noise if you're excited about Bitcoins. Before this event, who had heard of Bitcoins before the event? Well, who'd heard it because of me? Okay, So that means, particularly up until a few weeks ago, the majority of people on the planet were not familiar with what Bitcoins were, or a few people had a vague idea what they were. I obviously started writing a book on Bitcoins about a year ago, which was released a couple of months back, which some of you possibly read, or the first half of it we gave away. Some of you are patiently waiting for the rest of it. So my interest in Bitcoins originally started, and tomorrow if you watch Sky News, there'll be an interview, some of the interview that I did the other day will be on Sky News tomorrow. But started, when I, back in 2000, when I first wrote my first book, What I Didn't Learn at School But Wish I Had, you notice I did a chapter on the history of money and where money come from, and how throughout history by civilizations arose and fell when they started printing money. If you study history, the Roman Empire collapsed the same time as they'd completely removed silver as a backing to currency. I think when the Roman Empire collapsed, it went, silver, money was backed by silver, and actually it was about 98% of a silver coin was silver in the beginning of the Roman Empire. And the time it collapsed, it was 0.02% of silver in a silver coin. So you can see it throughout in Germany after World War I, and what you see in World War II, the hyperinflation. Whenever countries or empires start the printing presses and start just printing money, or fiat money as it's known, usually it's predictable that that empire will at some point in the future implode or collapse, because you can't just keep printing money. We've seen that in Zimbabwe. Is that true? Zimbabwe $1 was equal to a US dollar in the past. But then Mugabe got back into power and just started printing the printing presses to pay for things, and now they need a wheelbarrow load of Zimbabwean dollars to buy a loaf of bread, so much so that they won't even accept their own money. You can see that many times in the French economy, in the past French history, the printing presses got started and it destroyed their economies. So, and who's the latest nation to do rampant printing presses of money? The US economy. Then they're being followed now, what's worse, by most central banks around the world that are just running the printing presses as a short-term solution to trying to fix the massive debt problem. So in my book, I and others predict that by the end of the decade, there would be a crash of epic proportions, because it's just simply unsustainable, a debt-based monetary system that also is controlled by elite few. The Federal Reserve in particular, and the central control banks, when they're not exactly honest and transparent, and they're not voted to power like by voters, a small proportion of people have an unhealthy influence over the world's monetary system, which many people, including myself, don't think is healthy. And then we've seen in 2008 there was a crash of epic proportions, and the entire financial system was within hours of total meltdown and total collapse, which could have led to a Great Depression. Many people don't realize the world was within hours of a Great Depression again. When Lehman Brothers collapsed in particular, after that, banks stopped trusting each other, they stopped lending money to each other, and if that wasn't quickly solved, or at least with a short-term band-aid solution, then the whole monetary system would have collapsed, because banks would have stopped trusting each other, they would have pulled loans, and more banks would have collapsed, and then the banks would have pulled the loans off consumers in society, or people that have a house and all those sort of things. What happened in the Great Depression, and liquidity just disappears, and everything comes to a grinding halt at a rapid speed. So, not to scare you, but the systems were that close to total meltdown. So out of that chaos, a particular individual or group of individuals decided that the central banks have too much power, they're continuing to print money, they're being irresponsible, and therefore perhaps we need a new currency or a new monetary system. And the Bitcoins were created. The person who actually created it is anonymous. No one knows who it is exactly to this point. Goes under a pseudonym of I think Satoshi Nakamoto, but no one knows who exactly it is, or the group of people behind it. There's different theories. You'll hear the conspiracy theories of the CIA's behind it. You'll hear all this, but I don't believe that to be true. It's irrelevant either way, but they wanted to create, the goal was to create a virtual digital currency that was outside the central banking system and outside government interference. And that's what they created. So when Bitcoins were first released, it's like basically digital currency. Now, most of us now transact things through credit card, and our bank accounts are just digital numbers. You know, there's only a small percentage of cash in society, the rest is already. So the idea of transacting digitally, you know, as consumers, where, you know, with PayPal is another way of transferring money, etc. We've become much more comfortable with that. The difference with this is that it's, you know, some people that are uneducated about Bitcoins, and there's always cynics and naysayers to everything. And remember, we need those people. We need opposing views to create a market. Okay, so, you know, we want those people to be like that. They're probably eating their words at the moment as the meteoric rise of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin then started, and it was only a few cents. You could have bought Bitcoin in the beginning for a few cents. So how do you get Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is limited. Jot this down. There's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoins released into the world. There's about 11.9 million of them being mined already. So just like gold, you know, you have to mine gold to get it, and gold has been the standard safe haven or hedge or reserve currency to some degree throughout civilization. Bitcoin, you have to get it, you either have to mine it, okay? That's one way to get it. The other way is you can buy it. Second way to get it is to buy it. Jot this down. So you either mine it, and you say, well, how do you mine it? We'll mention that in a moment. 2, you can buy it. And how do you buy it? We'll mention that as well. And 3, you can effectively accept it. If you have a business or etc., you can accept Bitcoin. So my group of companies in Australia was one of the first companies in Australia to start accepting Bitcoins. And if you know, some of that was in the media, etc. And you'll actually, Richard Branson come out 2 days ago. Richard's been, said he's been buying Bitcoins as well, and he announced that Virgin Galactic will accept Bitcoins if you want to go into space on Virgin Galactic. It's $250,000 to go into space, so you'll need, you know, well, a few days ago you would have needed 250 Bitcoins to do that. Now you probably only need 220 Bitcoins, and the way it's going, you might only soon need 2.5 Bitcoins if some of my predictions are met in the future. So there's those 3 effective ways that you can get Bitcoin. Now, to mine Bitcoin, in the beginning, it was quite simple to mine it. You could have just had a home computer with the application of Bitcoin miner software, and you could just put it on, and what it would do, how it mines it, unlike, you know, getting the pick and shovel out and digging in the dirt to find bits of precious metal such as gold, it's solving complex computer algorithms. So the software is doing that, and if it breaks the code, it gets rewarded with a Bitcoin. Okay, so Bitcoin is released into the digital cyberspace. So there's stories. I'll give you an example. There's, in my book, I talk about there was a young guy in America who started mining Bitcoin a few years back in his garage, and completely forgot about it, and come back and discovered he had over $12 million worth of Bitcoin that had been mined. In today's figures, that's probably $80 million with the rampant increase in Bitcoin. So there is people, I've had some clients that have emailed, and even young people that started mining Bitcoin a few years ago, but remember, it was only worth 1 or 2 or 3 cents. So people weren't that excited about, yeah, I've got 3 cents, big deal. Little did they know what it was going to become worth. So a lot of them thought it was too much effort for the little bit of money, not knowing that one day, very soon, Bitcoin would be worth so much money. So a lot of them quit, like many people do. If they had stuck at it and just stored the Bitcoins aside today, they would be incredibly wealthy. There's a story which I put on my Facebook a few days ago, the gentleman that had mined Bitcoin, stored the Bitcoin algorithm or the codes on his hard drive, and unfortunately threw his hard drive out with some of when he was cleaning out his house. And now he realizes that that hard drive contains $6.9 million of Bitcoin in today's figures. So he's now at the garbage tip trying to find this hard drive that he threw out in the past, and no doubt so is everyone else. So there's story after story of people that either mined Bitcoin. I mean, this was only 2008 when it was 2009 when it was really released. So we're only talking the last 4 years, so it is a fairly new thing. So what also happened is that there was a Norwegian man invested $27 equivalent in Australian dollars, $27 in the early days of Bitcoin. He's now sitting on $4.5 million worth of Bitcoin. $27 into $4.5 million. I don't know about you, but I don't know of any other investment in the history of mankind that's ever produced those sort of returns. So then there was Then there's the, I remember Facebook, the story of Facebook, the movie. There was the Winklevoss twins, the two twins that claimed that Mark Zuckerberg stole their idea, and they sued Facebook, and they got $65 million in a payout in cash and $200 million in shares. A couple of years ago, they become some of the more well-known people to back Bitcoin, and they invest $11 million into Bitcoin. I don't know what their holding would be worth today, but you can imagine they've made another fortune as a result of that. So you're going to hear more and more of these stories that people invest into Bitcoin in early days and how much money they have made. So I'll give you an example of, if you had invested $10,000 3 years ago, you could have bought Bitcoin at 3 cents. Let's say 5 cents to make the figures. $10,000 3 years ago into Bitcoin at 5 cents. Can anyone tell me what the current price is of Bitcoin? Depends what exchange you're on, but Wall Street Journal, an article last night, said Bitcoin hit $1,242 on Mount Cox overnight. 1193, so about $1,200. So $1,200. So quickly work out. So it's now worth $1,200 per Bitcoin, current trading at the moment. If you invested $10,000 at 5 cents 3 years ago, what is your $10,000 now worth? 240 million? Any takers on that? So happy to accept 240 million. Like a week ago, I did the calculations. It was, a week or so ago, it was 150 million. So it's certainly gone up. So 240 million. Who would be happy with that return? Okay. Of course, not everyone invested 10,000 3 years ago. Neither did I. I certainly would have wished I had it as well. So the point is, actually, I was sharing on Sky News, I sold some gold, a batch of gold that I bought, maybe I think about 2 years ago, as a hedge, just an additional hedge. And I was saying I sold, here's an example, because a lot of people say, oh, well, Bitcoin is just a fad. Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme. You'll hear all these things, or it's just it's a bubble that's going to burst. All I would say is that I think a lot of people, even the analysts that might be saying that, they simply don't know what they're talking about. Is Bitcoin a fad? Well, if Bitcoin was a fad, it would have imploded before 4 years. 4 years now, it's 2013, nearly 2014. I think it's proven it's more than a fad. It's gone through a lot of volatility, it's gone through a lot of crisis, and it's stuck by. So I think it's gone past, it's proven it's not a fad. Is it a Ponzi scheme? Well, if you understand what a Ponzi scheme is, well, then it definitely isn't a Ponzi scheme. There's a finite amount of Bitcoins that will ever be available. It's an actual value. Some people say, well, it's only based on trust. If people have no trust in Bitcoin, then it's not worth anything. Well, if people have no trust in the US dollar, it's not worth anything either. So all currencies are based on trust. That's really not a valid counter-argument. Actually, in fact, one of the reasons why Bitcoin is rising is the lack of trust people are having in the current central banks and the relentless printing of money. Because we all know you just can't keep on printing money without one day creating hyperinflation. Does that make sense? America's got away with it since World War II, mainly because, see, Zimbabwe can't get away with it. Zimbabwe prints money. There's only a small demand for Zimbabwean dollars. I mean, who wants Zimbabwean dollars? Not even Mugabe. No one wants them, they're worthless. But US dollars, who wants US dollars? Everyone around the world. So America's been able to buy up the world by printing US dollars without any backed reserves, because they can export that inflation around the world. Because there's demand around the world. Because it's called what sort of currency? What sort of currency is it? Starts with R. It's a reserve currency. Being a reserve currency gives you massive advantages. You can just keep printing the money without causing rapid inflation, like Zimbabwe did, because you're exporting inflation and sharing it around the world. So they're able to get away for that for a lot longer. That's why they keep on doing it, because they know they can get away with it. That's why China is nervous, because China has a lot of US holdings, US cash reserves. And they're nervous, so they're like, well, we want an alternate currency. So they've been trying to create alternate currencies, but it'd be a long time before another currency could rival the US dollar. Therefore, when I was asked on Sky News, why do you think China, I said, you understand, China is seems to be quite supportive of Bitcoin, and that's one of the reasons why it's taken off rapidly in recent times. And they're like, well, why do you think China is usually a regulated government that wouldn't want to allow something like that to take off? I said, I think the reason China is supporting and allowing it to take off is because they want an alternate currency to the US. They want to hedge their bets against the US dollar. So if Bitcoin has the potential to maybe one day become, maybe not a reserve currency, because that would be a very successful outcome, but maybe just a small niche currency, even that would be enough as an alternative to help them hedge their bets. Does that make sense? And I think that's why China is supporting it. And China, a lot of Chinese are buying Bitcoin at the moment. So effectively what we're talking about is a new form of currency that's passed the test of not being a fad, but it's not a Ponzi scheme. Because a Ponzi scheme is when people pay money into an investment when the money's not really invested. It's the money's just being circulated back out to pay returns to original investors, and eventually the whole system collapses. That's a Ponzi scheme. Bitcoin is actually a currency. You're buying a currency which has some inherent value and has a finite amount. Why people like it is because unlike paper money you can keep on printing, there's only a limited amount of them, so it stops the inflation effect of it, which means it's going to put upward pressure on the price of it. So what will happen, who knows? But what we're looking at is possibly, you jot this down, your trend is a friend. And you've got to understand that you have now been made aware of probably the greatest investment return opportunity that's ever occurred in the history of humanity. Is that exciting? And you've only just found out about it in recent weeks. Is that true? Or when I started talking about it? Okay? Is that the reality is that's what you've seen. Now, does that mean it's going to be a great investment moving forward? Does that mean there's something that you should invest in? Well, let's look at some of those things in a moment. But what I'm saying, if something's gone from 10,000 investment to $240 million, am I fairly accurate in saying that's probably been the best investment in the history of humanity? Yes or no? Absolutely. It'd be hard to beat that into something that's not necessarily a bubble or not a tulip boom. It's not a dot-com company that's going to implode that's not really making anything. Something that actually has intrinsic value. Some people say, well, it's not like gold. I mean, gold, at least you have something physical, or you have a piece of metal. Do you know what I'm saying? What value does gold have other than the value that we perceive or give to it, other than the trust we place in gold? One of the reasons Bitcoin took off, remember there was a Cyprus banking crash earlier this year, I think in April, remember that? And what happened is that what freaked people out, because gold has risen. I told people to buy gold at $200 an ounce a decade ago. It went all the way up to $1,900 an ounce. Now where is it? I think it's even dropped down lower, hasn't it? To my knowledge, it's below. Guess what? Bitcoin, as of yesterday, overtook gold. I think gold is down about 1,200 or something. So Bitcoin's already overtaken it in value. See, what happened in Cyprus is that when the banks collapsed, they shut the banks. Imagine this happened. So shut your banks so you can't get your money. Then they said, well, we're going to reopen them, but we're going to take 30% of what was in your bank account. And imagine how people freaked out about that. But what they did to bail out Cyprus, the European Union said you have to sell, I think it was 400 billion or X amount of gold that Cyprus had. So Cyprus had to sell their gold. Now that's not enough to flood the gold market, but what it is enough to go, hang on a minute, if some of these other countries like Spain or other Italy and Greece collapse, or need a bailout, they're going to be forced to sell their gold. So all of a sudden, normally when there's a banking crisis, what will happen to gold prices? They'll normally shoot up, but guess what happened to them? It went down. So all of a sudden, gold lost its safe haven status. When it should have went up, it actually went down, because if these countries need bailouts, they have to sell their gold, it floods the market, and gold will go down. Okay, because gold's not necessarily rare. Did you realize gold's not necessarily rare? It would go down. So George Soros come out and said gold is actually now is no longer a safe haven. And when people like him say that, it supports a lot of evidence. Now, I'm not saying gold will have no long-term inherent value, but I'm saying the $35,000 extra worth of gold I bought 2 years ago, as an example, I sold last week for $23,000. If that $35,000 had been invested as a hedge, not into gold, but into Bitcoin 2 years ago, then that would be about $4.5 million. So if we're investing just purely as a hedge, what's a better hedge, 4.5 million or 23,000? That's the difference in gold to Bitcoin in the last 2 years. Who's following what I'm saying here? So by now, it should be getting you excited. Now, what does that mean for the future, though? Well, let's look at what's happened. And obviously, hindsight gives us a lot extra value. I told people to start buying Bitcoin at $120. It's now $1,200. So it's had a tenfold increase since then. But let's go back in time. Let's say when it was 1 cent, and then it went to 10 cents. So it's gone times 10. Then it went from 10 cents up to $1, true? There was another times 10 multiple. And then it went from $1 to $10. So you could have bought Bitcoin a year ago for around $10. $10,000 invested in Bitcoin a year ago is now worth pretty close to $1 million. Who had $10,000 available to invest a year ago? If you had bought Bitcoin, you'd have $1 million today. You would have had to been aware of something. I started writing a book a year ago, and then I sort of took a while, and I had my researcher doing the research on it. I said, I've been reading about this Bitcoin thing. I want to write a book, even though it's not something I normally would write about, but I'm studying, I've studied and had an interest in the history of money and the evolution of that and the Federal Reserve and what's going to happen. So I wanted to write it from that angle. And then I thought, maybe people won't be interested in Bitcoin. So the book took, to a couple of months ago before I released it. You probably would appreciate it if I had released it a year ago, okay? You mean like, well, maybe I should get onto this thing. But here's what will happen. Most people aren't trained to act. They're not trained to act. So the challenge is, even though right now it's becoming in mainstream media, not the average person on the street probably hasn't quite heard about Bitcoin or only heard a little bit about it, even though it's been one of the most phenomenal investment returns in the history of the planet, what do most people do about Bitcoin? Nothing. Because they're too busy making a living. There's a saying, apart from forget to live, most people are too busy working to get rich. True? Most people are too busy working to get rich. They're too busy to the grindstone and go, hang on a minute, maybe I should do a Nathan Tinkler and go and make $1 billion out of the mining industry. Or maybe I've heard about this thing called Bitcoin, I should check it out, I should at least act upon it. Okay? Most people just simply don't act and they go, well, if only. Okay? Or same with property. I wish I'd bought those properties 10, 20 years ago. Well, I did. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I got myself to act. Yes, of course, I wish I'd bought Bitcoin back in these days. But a year ago, you could have still bought it here. So Bitcoin then went to $100. So another times 10 multiple. So now even as a year ago, a month ago, Bitcoin was around $120. So a month ago, $10,000 into Bitcoin would now be worth how much? $100,000. Okay? So what you're seeing is that even in that last month, so when Bitcoin really start getting picked up on the financial news networks around the world, and that's why Sky News Tomorrow is running a lot on it, because it's becoming so popular, is 3 weeks ago, there was US Senate hearings about Bitcoin and about these currencies, and the US Senate said it is a legitimate form of currency. Ben Bernanke of the US Federal Reserve said some quite positive comments about it, that he thought, if it does become an alternate currency, it'll probably be a good thing for the world. Okay, so even the feds, etc., weren't like, because a lot of people like, the central bankers will try and destroy this, okay? There has been a few dirty tricks. Citibank, there was a report released on Bitcoin about a week ago that was basically defaming it, saying the guy behind Bitcoin is friends with the guy behind Silk Road, and then maybe he was funding Silk Road, and then it was on CNN or something, and then they had to put a retraction. Is that report was funded by a grant by Citibank, and a few days later, Citibank had the report pulled. Okay, it was basically to see who's funding the reports. It was basically a way of Citibank trying to defame or create volatility. You mightn't want to defame it for any other reason, to create volatility, go in and buy a shitload of it and then it goes back up. So this is the stuff that goes on in Wall Street and the markets, so you've got to be aware of those sort of things. So what happened the last 3 weeks, the mainstream media is starting to pick up on it. And because went from 100 to 350, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, people saying it's not going to go high, it's going to bobble, it's going to drop down, 900, 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, 1,250. Where will it go to? The Winklevoss, there's a Bitcoin industry that's booming, it's fastest growing industry on the planet right now. It's, ATM machines are starting, exchanges are starting. We're launching an exchange next week in Australia so people can trade and buy, through one of our exchanges, Bitcoin. There's big conferences. We'll be holding a summit early next year in Australia as well, but there's a lot of conferences going around the world because such a demand of people wanting to know what is Bitcoin, how do you make money from it, what's the ups and downs of it, what should we do? And so it's becoming quite interesting. Winklevoss brothers, you were speaking at a conference recently, and they're very bullish on Bitcoin. And they, this is only a couple of months ago, basically said that we believe Bitcoin will go to $10,000. They were literally laughed at and mocked. But now all the mainstream media is going, well, maybe their prediction is now more realistic. It's hit 1,200. It went from 100 to 1,200. 10,000 now seems more realistic. My predictions are, I believe it's possible, jot this down, it's more than possible, no one knows that Bitcoin could reach as much as $100,000 within 2 years. Now that's a pretty big prediction. But let's look at the fundamentals behind why myself and some others are saying it's possible to do that. No one knows, but this is what we'd look at. Certainly, if it's possible to go to 100,000 in 2 years, is 10,000 becoming certainly a greater degree of certainty, yes or no? Yeah, so if you bought it 1,000 or whatever, and it goes to 10,000, well then you've got that multiple of 10 again. There's some people predicting as much as $1 million in the future for Bitcoin. Where are these predictions coming from? No one knows, there's no guarantee. It could go from 1,000 or 1,200 is now, it could go to 0, is that true? Yes. Something could happen where it gets hacked or the system implodes. Unlikely, because there's so many people involved now and so many people have a vested interest in Bitcoin or have a commitment to it, but it could go to 0. But if you're an investor and go, okay, it's possible it could go to 10,000, possibly 100,000, that's the upside. If 100,000 was the upside, 1,000 to get in, your upside is huge, your downside is minimal. 1,000 to 0 versus 1,000 to 100,000. Who's following what I'm saying here? If you had that degree of certainty, you could go, oh shit, $1,000, $10,000, I can afford to lose that. I'm happy to take a bet for a longer term view that down the track it could be worth 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. Making sense? Now, the challenge with most people, they'll try and get rich quick. So they'll try and take a short term thing. Any of my things that I think about are longer term fundamentals. So you don't want to, some people, have got rich quick. But mainly those people that have is because they've had a longer term view, or others have just become accidental millionaires. I mean, the people that become millionaires so far are mainly accidental. They just mucked around mining a bit and ended up becoming millionaires and didn't really know, but they did get in ahead of a trend. They did get in ahead of what is a potential revolution of the monetary system. So there's a lot more to it than just some gimmick or some fad. There is a lot of fundamental reasons why Bitcoin can become a huge industry. Right now, there's about 11.9 million Bitcoins in circulation. That can go up to how many? What's the maximum? 21 million. And that will take to when? When are they expecting it to reach 21 million? 2140. Yeah, there's a few different, 2140 I believe it is. It simply means it'll take that long in the system, because the more they mine, the harder their logarithms get, the more it takes. Now, you might say, I want to go and mine Bitcoin. Well, in your garage, you probably miss that opportunity. You can still mine it, but now the algorithms are getting more and more complex, and plus how many other people now are jumping into the mining bandwagon, and you have to pool and network computers together to get them. But they're worth a lot more, so it might take a lot more to get them, but I guess they're worth a lot more. And if you go, well, they're going to be worth 100,000 one day, it was definitely worth mining them, okay? But you'll probably need to be a part of a pooled network or buy proper computer mining equipment, where in the early days, it was a little bit simpler, anyone could have done it, but they're only worth a few cents. So you're like, well, it's not really worth much, but they are now. So what you've got to look at here is, if you looked at an industry or a stock market cap, etc., if you start to apply that analogy to it, if right now, if it's worth, say, just $1,000, round figures, what is the total market cap of Bitcoin? Market cap means the total. If you're in the stock market, BHP might be trading at, say, $100, round figures. And there's 10 million shares. The market cap of BHP would be 10 million shares times $100. That would be the total market cap of the company. Making sense? So the total market cap of the Bitcoin, all the Bitcoins in circulation, if there's 11.9 million of them, times they're trading at, say, $1,000 each, equals how much? 11.9 billion? Is that right? So for them to hit $10,000 would be times 10, say. So a market cap times 10 would be how much? 119 billion thereabouts. The market cap of Facebook is how much? It's about $120 billion. It might be a bit more now. Does it make sense? So just one company has a market cap of the total market cap of Bitcoin if it went to $10,000. Raise your hand and you start to see that 10,000 is now much more realistic, much more probable if you understand market caps. Actually, it's becoming a fairly good bet. Doesn't mean it might be volatile in that time, yes, or doesn't mean it could get there in one hell of a hurry. What you're going to understand is that every day that goes by, the amount of people finding out about Bitcoin that want to get Bitcoin. Think about in this world as a hedge, knowing that gold has lost some of its hedge and safe haven status. Investors, and here's what some of the analysts are coming out in mainstream media and saying, it's a speculative investment, true. Therefore, you shouldn't put any more than 1% of your portfolio into Bitcoin. What they're really basically saying is if people went and put 1% of their portfolio in Bitcoin, what prices are going to hit in a hurry? Imagine companies that have billions of dollars in cash reserves. Imagine Warren Buffett, insurance companies, etc. You imagine the investors in the world. Do you think right now they're not going, get me some of that Bitcoin? Just as a hedge, just get at least 1% or 0.5% of portfolio, get it into Bitcoin just in case it goes to 10,000 or goes to 100,000, or just in case there is a banking failure, we need to be hedged and have some money outside the banking system. Who's following what I'm saying here? So is $120 billion in the space of all the money that exists in the world, is that a lot of money, or is that like a super tiny speck? Like it's one grain of sand on a beach. That's what it is. It's a tiny speck. That's if it hits 10,000. If people just go, how many people in Australia alone would go, you know what? It's worth a hedge in case there is a banking system collapse. Or it's worth a bet in case it does go up. I can afford to lose $1,000. I can afford to lose 10,000. I'll take a hedge. I'll take a bet. Is there a lot of people that could do that? A lot of people with a lot more money would do that. So the potential upside, I think, in my judgment, is fairly huge. To go to $100,000 would be times 10 again, which means the market cap would hit $1.2 trillion. Sounds like a lot of money, but for an alternate possible world currency or even a tiny niche currency, a market cap of $1.2 trillion is just a little bit bigger speck. Do you know what I'm saying? That's not a lot of money. Just a small percentage of the money in the world is shifted to Bitcoin as a hedge, would see that happen in a fairly short period of time. Repeat after me. Something to think about. Does anyone know? Yes or no? No one knows the future. However, if you understand fundamentals, who can see some opportunity in what we're talking about here? Now, who wishes they'd invested a year ago, even a month ago? So, of course, but do you know about this information, what I've just shared with you, before the majority of people on the planet? Yes or no? Yes, you're ahead of a trend. Actually, you know, this type of information explaining in this way has probably never been explained anywhere on the planet yet. And there'd be a lot of people out there who would like to hear what I've just shared. And just that being put on YouTube. And then other people following see the demand that can create. Okay? Is that because there is an enormous opportunity. So if you were to consider it as an investment, yes. Is it speculative, yes or no? Yeah, but is any investment speculative? To some degree it is. Is the upside potentially huge, yes or no? Yes. Certainly, but great upside. Downside, yeah, it could go to zero. You could lose your money. So if you were to invest in Bitcoin, you probably, jot this down. If I was to invest in Bitcoin, I would have to accept I could lose all my money. Is it fair enough? Now, that's enough to scare enough people, and they won't do it. But some of you go, yeah, I understand that, but I could also make a lot of money, so I'm willing to take that risk. Or you get other people going, I think what everyone should be at least doing this, I'm going to hedge my bets, because just in case there's a banking collapse in the future, would it hurt to have a couple of Bitcoins under the pillow, to speak? Yes or no? Because if there's a banking system collapse, you want money outside the banking system, because if banks collapse, you lose your money. But if you've got Bitcoins, you're not going to lose that because it's outside the banking system. The government can't take it off you. They can't freeze your assets either. You know how much money would go in from corporations just into Bitcoin, so regulators or governments can't freeze their money. Just the market demand for this is potentially enormous. That's why there's some people making outrageous claims that it might go to $1 million one day. Other people making less outrageous claims, like myself, saying it has the potential to go to 100,000. No one knows. I could be completely wrong, but I think in saying it has the potential, I think and we base it up with this, you're saying, well, that's fair enough, you can understand that. But if it has that potential, definitely 10,000, I think, is certainly on the radar, and that could happen soon. So 10,000 could turn into 100,000 for a lot of people if they were to do that, if that happens, okay? That would ultimately be up to you. Raise your hand if you're excited by this opportunity. It would be up to you what you do with it. You have to make your own analysis, do your own research. That's just sharing the research I've done, where I'm at. I'm continuing to buy Bitcoin. Even at 1,000, I'll continue to buy it. Even at 1,200, I'll continue. My wish is that it didn't go mainstream 3 weeks ago. That we had more time to accumulate even bigger reserves before everyone finds out about it. But the genie is out of the bottle in the last 3 weeks. So if there's going to be continued rise, it's probably going to rise fairly quickly in the short term. But then as more people find out about it, eventually, if most people have some Bitcoins, you can buy and trade and buy things with Bitcoin. So then that creates a whole new market and demand for Bitcoin. So all the demands for it are quite large. It'll also, you probably want to start looking at the Pepsi-Cola of Bitcoin, meaning like if Bitcoin's the Coca-Cola, who's going to be the Pepsi-Cola, Litecoin, all these other type of currencies that are starting to get some traction, so people are starting to look at those as potential investments. But even if Bitcoin was to fail, I would dare say it's on to something that will succeed and that will be successful as an alternate currency. I think that's fairly likely. However, I think as Bitcoin now, there's the network effect, just like Facebook. Facebook, you could come up with another Facebook, but your chances of beating Facebook are not very good, are they? You could come up with another Bitcoin, but the chances of beating Bitcoin are not very good because everyone is finding out about Bitcoin ahead of you. So there's what we call the network effect. Google, Facebook benefit from the network effect. Why do you join Facebook, some people? Because everyone else is on it. So why would you go and join a niche little equivalent of Facebook that no one else is on? Because it doesn't have the network effect. Turn the person next to you, explain to them all about Bitcoin, then I'll take a couple of questions. Okay, before I bring our next speaker up, you're going to have a speaker for 20 minutes before the dinner break, and then you have one final speaker after dinner break. So tonight after dinner, you'll be learning about US property, why I'm so bullish on that, and you'll see some real life examples of how getting up to as much as 40% return on US properties. Before we do that, I'm going to open up some questions on anything we've covered today, in particular Bitcoin. So does anyone have any questions on Bitcoin you'd like me to answer? I'm happy to take those questions. Let's start down the front here, far away.
My name's Gary.
Hi, Gary.
If we don't know who's behind it
Yep.
and what their motives are, doesn't that sort of create an element of, well, why is it here and what might happen in the future?
Yeah, it's the same question Sky News asked me. Does that concern me? No, because I think the people behind, well, it's actually irrelevant in some cases because it's open source and now there's a whole economy around Bitcoin. So whoever created or what their motives was is probably now secondary because it is an open source, it's there, okay? So, however, many people are fans of it. Libertarian view, I'm more of a libertarian in the sense, and a lot of people are, that want a little bit anti-government, anti-central banks, and wanted to see a system outside their power. So a lot of people are supporters of that on a higher level rather than just the money opportunity. So I think that gives a lot of support. I guess to answer your question, I mean, are you concerned who's behind the US Federal Reserve and the central control banks and the manipulation of the current monetary system? Are you concerned about that? Even if you are concerned about that, you should be. You continue to use dollars and continue to participate in the financial system. Does that make sense? So in that case, it's also irrelevant from that viewpoint. But I would dare say, there's always going to be conspiracy theories. Is the CIA behind this so they can try? I doubt that. I think it's done for the right reasons and it come out of the credit crisis and it's a solution to a problem. And therefore, I think it has some long-term potential. I think the idea of a digital currency, people are quite comfortable with. An idea of one that's outside the control of governments and central banks is quite good. I know there's a lot of talk about Silk Road and they shut down the eBay of selling drugs and they tried to link that to Bitcoin. But just because people use dollars to trade drugs now, do we shut down the cash economy because drug dealers use cash to buy and sell drugs? Should we shut down Bitcoin because one website on the internet was using Bitcoin to trade drugs? Once again, it's irrelevant, isn't it? I mean, money can be used for whatever it is. So that argument is that's where they try to sort of like create a little bit of defamation around it. It's gone well beyond that now. When they thought when Silk Road shut down that was doing a lot of volume of Bitcoin that would affect it, didn't even miss a blink. Cyprus saw it jump up to 250 and then drop back a bit. You'll see that volatility. The biggest argument is quite volatile, but with a new currency that's developing its credibility, you would expect it to be volatile, true? Where you could reduce the volatility just by printing, like the US does, just by printing money to smooth it all out. That would be a negative. So my answer to the question is no, I'm not particularly concerned. Should you be particularly concerned? Well, no more than you should be concerned about the current financial system. Yep. Far away. Yep.
Sorry. Hi. I just wanted to know, how do you actually purchase into Bitcoins and how do you get your money out?
Okay, yep. Good question, most common question. One of the reasons why we decided to launch a Bitcoin exchange is that we've been getting asked this question so many times. How do you buy Bitcoin? How do you trade Bitcoin? You can do it through different exchanges. You can go on Google and you'll find there's exchanges, different exchanges. The most popular ones are probably Mt. Gox or now China, BBT or something, BPC is one of the biggest. You'll be able to, on one of your forms you've got, if you want to use 21st Century Exchange, we're taking manual orders this weekend, and then that will be, it's in pre-launch phase. If you want, there's an order form there. You can effectively order Bitcoin, and then we'll purchase it for you, and that's how you do it. As far as how do you use Bitcoin, it's very liquid. One way to explain Bitcoin, I guess it's a bit like barter card in one way, but imagine barter card if you can convert it to cash like that. Bitcoin can be converted to cash quicker than a check, quicker than probably any current currency. You know, if you transfer money over the internet, you're in the bank, you usually have to wait till the next day or whatever. Bitcoin is very quick. So that is highly liquid. At the moment, it's incredible. The only lack of liquidity at the moment is because everyone wants it and not many people want to sell it. Because if you think it might go to 10,000, do you really want to be selling Bitcoin? It's also the challenge when buying through some exchanges. So, you know, exchanges will charge you a commission. So a lot of exchanges, and they'll require you have to pull out cash and go and bank the cash, because a lot of exchanges won't accept internet transfer. But they'll charge, a lot of exchanges are charging 10% commission. To get the really low commission, you have to set up a bank account, be verified, and that can take weeks and weeks. And then some of them, even Mt. Cox and some of these exchanges, people just can't get their orders in. They're just, because there's such demand, they're struggling or the systems aren't working. So it can be difficult to buy it initially. And it can be frustrating because you're seeing the price go up. You wanted to buy it here and it's going up, and it's like you're pulling your hair out. It's like, well, I just can't get my hands. So there is some exchanges, they'll charge you, say, 10%. So you want to pay $1,000 for Bitcoin, they'll charge you 10% on top. The bigger exchanges are much less fees, but you have to have an account and verified, and that takes time. And then even then, some people aren't getting their orders through. You can use 21st Century Bitcoin Exchange. We're happy to have your custom, but we're taking manual orders. The automated software to do that will be launched shortly thereafter, but we can at least start taking manual orders for you. And we charge 5% as opposed to some exchanges charging 10%. Okay. Does that answer? As far as liquidating your Bitcoin, yeah, you can sell too back to an exchange, or some businesses accept Bitcoin to purchase things, and that's expanding the amount of businesses that will eventually take Bitcoin. Is growing rapidly. As it becomes more popular, more and more businesses will accept it, more and more consumers will find out about it, and has that spiraling effect of more and more demand for it. So as far as liquidity, very liquid. Okay, if you had Bitcoins now, you could sell them like that. Okay, through an exchange. They will beg you for the Bitcoins because they know they can take them and sell. The other thing that's stopping a lot of exchanges, why you sometimes can't, you want to put an order through an exchange and there's delays, or you can't get them, is that a lot of exchanges, a bit like buy and hold property. So the only downside of having an exchange is that, do you really want to sell Bitcoin? The exchange has to buy them and has to sell them. It's making a commission in between. So it's making some money, but often it's going up in price that much. A lot of exchanges like stuff selling them. If we've got some, we're just going to keep them and hold them as they go up and then maybe sell them. So you see the problem that's starting to happen because people are making so much money by just holding the Bitcoin. So a lot of exchanges are like, we'll make more money by not selling them to people. Just hold them. So that's what starts to create a problem. So that can make it difficult getting them. To sell them, not a problem. If you said you had Bitcoin for sale, you could sell it in 2 seconds, even outside an exchange these days. But there's heaps of exchanges. Does that answer the question? So generally, it's fairly easy once you have an account open. Otherwise, you can use a standard exchange and pay cash, and they'll do it. They'll just charge you. You'll be paying high commissions. But if you're comfortable, it's going up in value to 5 or 10,000. You don't mind paying a 5 or 10% commission. Any other questions? Okay, let's go here.
Hi, my name is James.
James, how are you?
Good, thanks. I'm not a member yet.
Yep.
But I do intend to become a member. If I want to action on this Bitcoin, do I have to be a member first, or?
To use Bitcoin Exchange, you don't have to. No, they are giving discounts. Obviously, I remember you'll get a discount on some of the commission. What you can do is that we're launching the first Bitcoin Bootcamp, which I'll be delivering myself, and that will be held in Melbourne in a couple of weeks. You jot down the dates. December 20th, I think it's planned. It's limited to 25 people. We'll be at our head office just down the street here in Melbourne. And I guess it's more for people that really want to be investors, more the higher level stuff. You want to like, what's an investment strategy and answering questions, and how do you go really about profiting from Bitcoins. If you want to be a part of that will be filmed, so it will create a home study. So if you do want to find out about that, and before we bring up our next speaker, you can see the team at the back. They'll give you an order form for that. Next year we are looking at launching a Bitcoin Summit We'll invite a lot of the leading speakers on Bitcoin into Australia, and we'll certainly let you know about that as well. You'll be hearing a lot about Bitcoin anyhow. Maybe go onto Google Alerts and add yourself to Google Alerts on Bitcoin. You'll be updated daily on all the news that starts to come out, and you'll start to see all the talk. It's all in the mainstream media now. When I spoke to Sky News, they said, look, we can't get enough content on Bitcoin. It's that everyone wants to find out about it. It's going to become pretty big pretty soon. Any other questions? Who really wants to ask a question? Let's go over this side. We haven't heard from this side of the room for a while. Far away.
Hi, Jamie. Just wanted to ask, if you invest in Bitcoin and you do make the capital gains, how do you declare that for tax purposes?
Yeah, very good question. Well, if you make a profit and you live in Australia, you're meant to declare your tax as per normal. It would be an income. So that's just up to you to abiding by the tax rules. What a lot of the regulators won't like about Bitcoin is outside the system, so it's anonymous and it's hard. You can't really track it. But yeah, if you're making money and you're an Australian resident, then you've got to abide by the rules. Otherwise, the ATO can come after you. What will eventually happen, the regulators will regulate. Germany's recognised as an official currency. A few other countries have. Australia is a highly regulated market, but they're usually a bit behind the 8 ball. The UK regulators have come out recently and said, even with exchanges, we don't require them to be licensed or regulated because there's not enough volume yet for us to be bothered regulating it. ASIC, we might send them a letter and ask their position on Bitcoin, but their position probably is, I would dare say, we're watching it, but really at this point, until the government decides to make it law, accepted as an official currency, there's probably nothing that they can do, or they've probably got their hands full of other stuff, and they're not too worried about it. I mean, if you want to go and speculate on Bitcoin, if people lose a lot of money, even then they're probably not going to be worried about it because it is a speculative investment. It's up to individuals. Is that true? But eventually they'll probably regulate. But all regulated means is you have to be licensed then to talk about it, and exchanges will have to be licensed. It doesn't really change much. It's just like the stock market. You can't just have a stock exchange unless you are having a license for it. The other question with that, those who want to become 21st Century members, if you see the team, you'll be able to attend the boot camp for $1 if you become a member this weekend. Okay, so any other questions? Let's go over here. Sounds like you guys are interested in this. Is it something new for you, something exciting? Who knows the future of it? I would certainly hope that it does do well and you guys make a cool 100,000, or some of you might make a couple of million out of that. Would be great. Send me a Christmas present.
Just on the possibility that it would have like $100,000 Bitcoin.
Yep.
Obviously, you're not going to go buy a loaf of bread with that. So, as far as that goes, how does that affect the currency? Like not being able to use it like in a store to purchase.
Good question. Yeah, you can transfer things in parts of Bitcoin, etc. So it doesn't affect it. Okay, so when you transfer or buy something, you're getting a micro part of it. Okay, transferred. So already you can do that. So. And any problems that do come up, it's open source, and there's a lot of people working on Bitcoin that will solve a lot of the problems. The biggest issues that the mainstream media will have is apart from the speculative, volatile nature of it, is hackers. So there's people that have had so if you buy Bitcoin, don't leave your Bitcoin account number or your code on a computer that's connected to the internet, because hackers can get into your computer and steal your Bitcoin. So that has happened. Some exchanges have had Bitcoin stolen, where hackers attacked exchanges and stole the Bitcoins that people had, stored there, etc. So if you're going to have a Bitcoin, that's why you should put it on. What the Winklevoss brothers have done, twins have done, they've put their holdings on 3 separate hard drives or disks, and then put it in 3 separate bank safety deposit boxes. So if one gets burnt down or whatever, they've got 2 backup copies, because it is like an algorithm. So the downside, I guess, if you accidentally pay your Bitcoins to the wrong person, you can't get them back. There's no bank to go to and say, I made an error. That's the advantage of being in a system outside the system, is that we like the freedoms with it. The downside is that there's no room for error. So you've got to be aware of that. So we can't, there's upsides and there's downsides. But any security type risk, it's been around 4 years and it hasn't stopped yet. If a lot of those things that was going to stop it would have been, if it was a fad, it would have been, you wouldn't be hearing about it by now, it would be gone by now. But who knows? No one knows, you know. But it's an opportunity. Okay, I'll take one more question. Yep, let's go here in the second, sorry.
Hi, my name's Colin.
Hi, Colin.
I'm doing computer science. So as a programmer, I have a concern.
Yep.
Should we be worried about another anonymous team creating an open source software similar to Bitcoin by leveraging the hype that's around with Bitcoin right now?
As far as creating a competing currency, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So already that has happened. So Litecoin, you might want to check out. Some people are now going, they're saying that's the silver and Bitcoin's the gold. So a lot of people are now backing these alternate currencies because they could be the Pepsi-Cola versus the Coca-Cola. So there could be opportunities there. I haven't, we're only just starting to do some research on Litecoin and see whether there's any investment opportunities there. But that will start to happen. But as I said, it's like you're saying, well, yeah, we can have some developers create, Facebook's a great idea. Let's go and start our own Facebook. We're going to make billions. Well, are you? Are you going to be able to compete with Facebook because it's getting all the attention? It has the network effect. You understand the network effect is the first major company or into an industry tends to have an advantage. Sometimes the pioneers get the arrows in the back from the Indians. The ones that come after that often do well, but I think Bitcoin has been able to become a pioneer and remain alive long enough to now have the network effect. And so more and more people find out about Bitcoin. It's very hard for a second player to perhaps catch up to them. Maybe, but I think Bitcoin now is on a massive momentum. And once it becomes, as more and more brand people say they're investing in Bitcoin, like, if you say, well, if you don't, necessarily like my analysis of it could go to 100,000, well, the CEO of Baidu, I think you say Baidu, the eBay in China, equivalent of eBay in China, come out only last week and said he believes it can go to 100,000 as well. Many prominent people are saying that. So it's not just me saying that. That's just on my analysis. And we don't know that, but I think that when you back it up with some fundamentals, you go, well, it's not just trying to guess something. There's some fundamentals behind that. Okay, so those who want to find out more, you're welcome to speak to the team. You're welcome to come to the boot camp, but we'll only be training 25 people on that. Those who want to really get into that seriously, it's not for everyone. Otherwise, you have some information there. You're welcome to use our exchange or go onto Google and use whatever exchange you want to get some Bitcoin. You have to accept your responsibility. If you buy Bitcoin and it goes to zero, I don't want you going, I lost money because of Jamie McIntyre. I didn't tell you to buy Bitcoin. Does it make sense? I showed you the potential, my views on it. If you buy Bitcoin, who's responsible? Me. You are, and we've got this all on camera, okay? Okay, we'll come find you, okay? So you have to accept those decisions, and that's ultimately up to you. And you should make that comfortable making that decision, whatever's right. And you have to do that with all investing. It's an opportunity. What you do with it will ultimately be up to you.